SMD Law is the official law firm of the Spartan Nation. Check them out on the interwebs at smdalaw.com or at 866-529-3537. No matter where you are in the state of Michigan, Upper Peninsula, Lower Peninsula, it doesn't matter. They have an office near you. So whether you need to send a letter to an annoying neighbor, or you're a criminal and you need defense, maybe you just have problems with elder law, check them out, smdalaw.com today. The official law firm of the Spartan Nation. Call them first, then you act.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome back to Spartan Nation Radio. I am your host, Hondo Carpenter. Very excited to be joined for the hour today by a very good buddy of mine. You know this. I do not respect a lot of journalists, and I am one of them, because I think they go for low-hanging fruit. A lot of times they'll take lazy opinions. They don't dig. They don't try to get research. They don't try to give. It's just whatever they can type out to get clicks. I've shared this story 1,000 times. I remember once being in a press box and hearing a very well-known national writer. This person's won tons of awards, sold a lot of books, all of that. Turn and say, give me the most controversial thing you guys think I can write about. He goes, I want to get some clicks. And literally did. And the next day, I had people call the show. I had people email me all over our message board. And I remember sitting in the press box knowing this guy didn't believe what he wrote, but he knew the clicks he was going to get. Our next guest is not one of them. He is a terrific person. He is one of my favorite journalists. I have never once been at an event with him that when I read what he wrote, I didn't learn something. And that says a lot when I was there. I respect him as a man, a husband, a dad, but he's a great writer for the Sporting News. He's why I read the Sporting News and why you should add it to your favorites. Welcome back to the show, the great Bill Bender. Bill, how are you, buddy?
That's a great introduction. I'm humbled, Hondo, and it's the fact that I'm talking to you means we're getting a little bit closer to Big Ten Media Day. Excited for another season, as I'm sure they are up there at Michigan State, and quite honestly, a couple other places in the Big Ten. This is going to be a fun year.
I agree with you, Bill. Let's get right into the Sporting News Top 25. You've got a team there that I really like as well, the Boise State Broncos.
Yeah, they start off our list. A lot of Broncos fans got on me thinking I didn't have them high enough. But, I mean, obviously, they win double digits every year out there in the Mountain West. They've got an experienced quarterback in Brett Rippon. Brian Harsin's probably one of the most underappreciated coaches in the country. And they're going to be good. I don't know. I think they're good enough to snag a New Year's Day 6 bowl, but they've lost a couple home games the last few years. So that's probably why we've had them a little bit lower than we usually do.
At 24, you got the Mississippi State Bulldogs, and I agree they're very talented. I love their head coach, but he's a first-year guy, so I was a little bit surprised to see him where you got him, but I think that it makes sense with that talent, Mississippi State.
Well, you and I both know there's a handful of teams every year that are kind of that, chic pick, that, sleeper team, whatever you want to call them, and Mississippi State's certainly that. I mean, we both have watched Joe Moorhead work on the offensive end at Penn State. Great play caller, great offensive mind. But they have big questions. I mean, Nick Fitzgerald helped one of them. I think the schedule of playing in the SEC West, another one. They haven't beat Alabama in, I think, 11 years. So there's a lot there. But it'll all depend. Like you said, Hondo, I think you said it best. First-year coaches are hard to gauge, so that's probably why we have them on the back end.
South Carolina Gamecocks at 23. I like this pick. I don't know why, because I'm not a fan of the program, especially since Steve Superior left. But I'm not a fan of their head coach at all. I think he's an underproducer. But, man, I like the talent he has there, even if I'm not sold on the head coach.
Well, and they can take advantage of the fact that Florida and Tennessee are making transitions with first-year coaches. And they've got a pretty good quarterback in Jake Bentley. And they played Georgia early in the season at home at Williams-Brice Stadium. That's going to be a really hot game. Temperature will probably be in the hundreds, or 90s at least. I don't want to sell a game in the hundreds. That'd be too hot. But I think they're a decent SEC sleeper. And Will Muschamp has learned some lessons from his last stop. So this is a team to watch. If they beat that Georgia game, all bets are off in that division.
Totally agree. Next, I'm going to go to a team that I'm a little bit surprised. I think you may have them a little low. I'm not saying much higher. I like the Texas Longhorns, and you do too at 22.
I do, and I thought, honestly, Hondo, I thought you were just going to say you have them too high, or here we go again with Texas, because that's the most frequent submission I get on them is, Texas is overrated, and the program in general probably has been since at least the end of the Mac Brown era. But Tom Herman has recruited well. The fact that they didn't go chase Joe Burrow tells me that they're comfortable with their quarterback situation, whether it's Ellinger or Buechele. And they played Oklahoma tough last year. So I think that combination, Texas might be, I don't know if they're the second best team in the Big 12, but we've got a couple teams ranked higher. But I think they will challenge Oklahoma, and they'll challenge some of those teams for the Big 12.
I love Bill. Bill's a listener. He's a great writer. If you don't read Bill, I've said this 100 times. To me, a great writer, I can be in the same event as them and learn something I watch with my eyes, and I do that every time with Bill. I just really appreciate him as a writer and a guy. At 21, you've got a program that, to me, I don't know how to stomach. I think there's so much internal strife. I think Mike Gundy's done a great job at Oklahoma State. They've clearly forgotten that they're Oklahoma State. At some point, I just want to see the guy be able to move on so he can go somewhere that'll appreciate him, Oklahoma State. But can't blame them. They can't play defense.
Well, that's it. And, I think, obviously, Gundy and President were in the headlines last week because of the they were getting on Gundy for his recruiting. I think he is a guy that, like you said, Oklahoma State before him, really before Les Miles got them turned around a little bit, they were nobody in the Big 12. So the fact that they go out and win 10 games a year, the one criticism that sticks with Gundy is, and it's fair on some levels, is that they don't beat Oklahoma, and they haven't done that often. But Oklahoma obviously has got a bunch of advantages. Now, for this year, I think a big question is, how do they replace Mason Rudolph? How do they replace James Washington? We know they're going to score some points, but at some point with those teams, as you said at the top, they've got to get a stop in a critical game situation. And Oklahoma State's that one of those teams that just doesn't do that.
Next, a team that I think you may have a little low. Florida State Seminoles. There's a lot of talent there. I think last year was a little bit of an anomaly. I think Harlan Barnett, who's, for the interest of full disclosure, a great friend of mine, is going to do great with that defense and that talent, but I like the Seminoles.
Yeah, the big question is, can they beat Clemson? Can they close that gap on Clemson? I think Harlan will be a part of that. I really like the Willie Taggart hire. Another one, a guy that's good with quarterbacks, good with recruiting in Florida, and in general, just, he leaves a program in better shape than he found it. Now, the trick with Florida State is they're not worried about how the program looks. They're worried about winning national championships, and they have to close that gap with Clemson. I think the quarterback battle will be interesting. And again, you said it, the talent's there. Florida State, they're not short on talent. They've got a Cam Akers. They've got guys all over that defensive line. But I probably, with these first-year coaches, probably played a little conservative. That's a program maybe I did rank a little too low.
19, the TCU Horned Frogs. I think they have the second most underrated coach in America. I'm going to tell you this. I've got my top 5 coaches that are most underrated. I'm not going to say where I've got him, but I've got him in that top 5. I love Gary Patterson, and I love me some Horny Toads.
Gary Patterson wins 10 games every year. They've done it through 4 or 5 different conferences. It's amazing what he does. I'd probably have them lower than a lot of other publications do because, Hondo, I look at everybody else too. I want to gauge where we're at compared to other people. And TCU's really ranked high, and I think it's because of that defense. But we're going to learn all we know about them when they play at Jerry World on September 15th against the Ohio State Buckeyes. Huge non-conference game, huge test for TCU. We know they can get to the Big 12 championship game. The next thing for that program is break through and get a playoff bid.
Yeah, I agree with you. We're talking to Bill Bender from the Sporting News. Just absolutely phenomenal writer. I love the Sporting News. I love the way Bill just handles things. I love the way he writes. If you don't read Bill, let me just say this. You really should. He's a terrific writer. Follow him on Twitter for sure. Bill, tell everyone what your Twitter handle is, will you?
Yeah, I'm at Bill Bender 92, and I can return the favor. You said one of the things with my approach is to learn something. Whenever I go to Michigan State, I want to learn something. I typically go straight to you. You guys got a great set of beat writers up there, and I think we will talk about the Spartans here in a little bit, but I think that's the key for me, at least, is to stay humble and just try to learn something from everywhere I go and read as much as I can and accept that, my opinions aren't final. They're fun. I like getting pushback and having fun with it.
Well, he's a good one. That's why I read the Spartan News. More with the great Bill Bender when we come back. Welcome back to Spartan Nation Radio. Thanks, everybody, for being with us. We're joined by the great Bill Bender from the Sporting News. We're going over the Sporting News' top 25 here on Spartan Nation Radio. You can tell we're inching closer to college football. Thank you, Lord. We come in now at number 18, where we're going to spend a little bit more time in detail on these teams as we start moving up the ranks. It's the LSU Tigers. Now, I'm going to say this. I like Ed Orgeron. I think Ed is a great person. I personally really like him and would love him on my staff. I would not want Ed as a head football coach. I think he makes some critical mistakes. So I would say I think Bill has them rated a little bit high here because of the conference they play in, and I think that's why. And the head coach, just because I think every year he'll make a decision you shake your head at, but the talent is certainly there to be higher than 18. Bill, talk Tigers with us.
Well, I think Joe Burrow, adding him in is huge. That may buy Ed Orgeron some time because I think he's going to do well. Not a lot of people know much about Joe, who, obviously transferred from Ohio State. Maybe I'm overvaluing him a little bit, but I saw a pretty good quarterback in the spring game the last 3 years. Talent's there. They went 6-2 in the SEC last year, and that kind of caught my eye because I just assumed, for all those reasons you were talking about Ed Orgeron, that their record was worse. But I think the Bull loss, the loss to Troy, that's what they can't do, Honda. They can't lose to Troy. They've got to reestablish that home base as one of the toughest places to play in college football, and they got to make it work at quarterback, or we're going to have that same speech about them next season.
I think one of the best young coaches in America, and I guess I shouldn't necessarily use the word young, but one of the top guys a lot of people don't know about is the head coach at the number 17 team. I like the Virginia Tech Hokies, Bill.
So do I. I think, obviously Josh Jackson's eligibility has been cleared up. Justin Fuente, he just fits there. I mean, they struck gold when Frank Beamer leaves, retires, and you kind of knew that was coming to an end. And they bring in literally the perfect coach for that program because he's renovated the offense. They still have Bud Foster's defense. They're going to be a factor in that coastal race in the ACC. They've made Blacksburg a tough place to play again. And like you said, it comes down to the coach. You mold your program with your coach. And I think he's a guy that they're going to continue to build on what he's built the last 2 seasons. They're not going to be an easy team to beat.
Bill, when I looked at your number 16 team, my first reaction was, what are they thinking? I don't get this one at all, and I think you are great. You guys at the Sporting News do a great job. But the loss of Scott Frost, to me, was the biggest loss for any team with a coach. You at UCF at 16, to me, was a stunner. Maybe at 25 at 16. So you got to explain this one to me, buddy.
Well, look at the schedule. I think they're a team that they can win the American Athletic Conference again. They have Mackenzie Milton. I get that and it's a program that's doing a lot of barking, obviously with the claimed national title. Now, if they go in and they beat North Carolina, or if they lose to North Carolina, I'll apologize to all your listeners and say how wrong I was. If they beat North Carolina and Pitt, they set up the game against Florida Atlantic, they're going to get into November undefeated again, and that's going to be uncomfortable for the college football playoff committee. Now, the second they lose, the storyline goes away, and we're not talking about a group of 5 team making the college football playoff, but they're the team that can push that. Probably a little high. I think in our original rankings, I had them down in the 20s. I'm not trying to get clicks with that. I'm just kind of looking at their schedule.
Well, and I can tell you this, ladies and gentlemen, because I know Bill, and I know anything he's involved in, it's not about clickbait, so I believe that. Number 15 is a team, a lot of talent, but then they lost a quarterback in Sam Darnold, the USC Trojans, the men of Troy.
Yeah, we're going to find out what Clay Helton's all about. I mean, I didn't know this till the other day. I was doing some research for something else we're doing. They haven't lost a home game the last 2 years. They've played well at home. They've played in 2 New Year's Day Six Bowls. They've lost a couple games. They've had a clunker or two in there. But I think in general, Clay Helton's done a pretty good job there. The Pac-12 South's pretty wide open. They're going to have to figure out quarterback. But I figure you got to figure the Trojans will be in that mix with everybody else in defending that division.
Interesting stuff. Now we're going to come to a team that I'm going to tell you this. If I had to give a list of teams that I'm not calling out a national title for, but a team that I think is a dark horse contender for a national title, this would be a team that you have at 14. When we release the Spartan Nation Top 25, I'm going to have them closer to number 10, but I can't argue at 14 with a terrific coach. Again, one of those top 5 most underrated. That's the Stanford Cardinal.
You know, I think having a Heisman Trophy candidate right at the front, Bryce Love, helps. They're going to be good. They've got a tough September. That's what's standing in the way. They play San Diego State. They lost to them last year. They play USC. Then they play Oregon and Notre Dame on the road. I'll tell you this, Hondo, if they get through September with an undefeated record, everything you've said will come to light because they will be right at the front of the playoff race. They're a program, David Shull's done everything there but break through to the playoff. It's very similar to TCU. But they're going to need Costello to develop a little bit at quarterback and they can't be one-dimensional if they're going to do that.
Okay, the next pick you have for me, I'm stunned. Now, you know me very well, Bill. I think you know I cover Michigan State. It's good for my business when they do good. I'm friends with a lot of people there. But I'm also not one who's not willing to call Michigan State out. How you have Michigan State at 13 and some of the teams ahead of them, 20 starters back after a 10-win team, I just don't get it. So tell us what you're thinking. I'm not calling you out. I just don't get it.
Well, how high would you go with them? Because it's hard. I mean, the Big Ten has 5 teams that are basically top 10 worthy, in my opinion, based on talent.
All right, that's a good point. But here's what I would say. You've got Michigan ahead of them, which Mark D'Antonio has proven to own that program, with Shea Patterson coming off a major injury. And it's at home at Michigan State. I don't get the hype for Michigan there at 12, especially with what Michigan State's done. Michigan State beat them with basically the same team they had last year. Michigan's lost guys, and they have a quarterback who's unproven because of injury, especially the injuries coming off. It was a posterior cruciate ligament, not an anterior, which is significantly more difficult to come back from with Shea's talent. That's what surprised me. I'm not calling you out, not arguing. I'm really trying because I know you're analytical. Explain how you come to 13 to me.
Well, it's close. I mean, I think those 2 programs, I was going to rank them back-to-back anyway. I don't think Michigan State's far and away ahead of Michigan, and vice versa. I think Michigan has a top 5 defense coming back with, NFL talent. If you're looking at the preseason list, Rashawn Gary and Winovich and Khalid Hudson and, I could go on. They have that on the defensive side. Quarterback was the missing piece the last 2 years. You're absolutely right to bring up the injury concerns with Shea Patterson. I could have just as easily flipped these 2 teams, but I think in general they're close. I mean, I know you guys spend a lot of time up there arguing Michigan State and Michigan, but
true.
I don't think either program is light years ahead of the other one. I think it's very close. That game last year was very close in a monsoon, and when they play in East Lansing this year, there's going to be a lot on the line for both teams.
All right, next we come to the number 12 team he's got, the Michigan Wolverines. Talk about them a little bit more, would you, my friend?
Well, the biggest concern with them is the schedule. I mean, everybody's going to get on Jim Harbaugh and say he's hot, this and that, but they have the toughest crossover schedule of the Big Ten. They play Nebraska, who will be confident early in September. They play Wisconsin, who, that's another tough team to gauge. I don't think Wisconsin's necessarily better than Michigan or Michigan State, but they play in the Big Ten West, and they have a lot easier schedule. Michigan plays Northwestern. And they play Notre Dame. So Jim Harbaugh's going to have to earn it this year. I think I try to take a moderate approach with them. I know it's either Harbaugh's the most overrated coach ever, or if you're in Ann Arbor, he's the greatest coach ever. Some people think that still. I would just take the middle ground. I think 12 is about right for them.
I'm going to say this. I think Jim Harbaugh is a very, very good coach. You don't have the success that he's had and not be a very, very good coach. So I don't disrespect him at all. I think their fan base is so whacked out nuts that, their expectations there should be no hot seat because you have no one else. I mean, think about the guys that they've hired. They brought in Rich Rod, who was their fourth or fifth choice because people didn't want the job. They bring in Brady Hoke, who was the fourth or fifth choice. No one wanted that job. They play Michigan State at home. In East Lansing. They go and they play Notre Dame. I just think the schedule's brutal. I'm looking forward to this. I'll tell you this. If these two teams are back-to-back like this at the end of the year, you're going to get all the respect in the world from me. Well, that's not fair because, Bender, you got all the respect from the world in me.
Well,
More with Bill when we come back. Welcome back to Spartan Nation Radio. I'm your host, Hondo Carpenter. This is the Spartan Nation Radio and the SportingNews.com annual Top 25 show with our good friend, the one, the only, the great, the effervescent Bill Bender. Bill, has anyone ever called you the effervescent?
Not recently, but no, we had a good segment there, and let's get into it. I know we want to get into it with this top 11. This is where, and I'll say this before we get into it. Right about that line where we were at USC, I think USC down are teams that you should almost book. That's the pool of 15 teams or so that'll probably take up those 4 playoff spots.
Yeah, I agree with you. Bill, but before we get into this next group, I want you to tell everyone about Sporting News, please. Tell them about the site. Just kind of you guys' philosophy as a site, would you?
No, yeah, we've been around since 1886, obviously, and I know the most frequent thing I get on the road is, I used to read the magazine. Well, we haven't had a magazine since 2012, so we've really tried to push into the online age. We've got a good group of writers. Mike DeCourcy, our college basketball writer, is probably the best basketball writer in the country, and I don't say that lightly. And we just work hard. And on the college football side, that's what it's about. It's every day I try to get some content up for somebody to look at. You don't have to agree with all of it, but at the same time, it's a fun sport, like we were saying at the break. You and I have fun covering it, fun debating it, fun talking about it, and if you can't have fun doing this job, you shouldn't be doing it.
I agree. Next, so let's get to number 11, one of my favorite coaches in America. I'm a little bit surprised you have him this high, but I don't think it's a bad pick. I thought it was a little high. The Miami Hurricanes.
Their schedule's favorable if they can beat LSU. If they beat LSU in the opener, then I think it opens up the door for a team that's going to have a pretty good running back in Travis Homer. The defense has guys that can fly around. Jaquan Johnson will probably be an All-American safety. And that'll continue into this year. I think one of the things that stood out, bowl game notwithstanding, because they got beat up pretty good by Wisconsin, is that they established that Hard Rock Stadium down there in Miami is a tough place to play. I was down at the Notre Dame game last year. Notre Dame had no chance. So that probably leads to a team we're going to talk about soon. But I think the Hurricanes will be right back in the mix, and we'll find out what they learned from last year's late season slide.
And number 10, you've got a team that I'm calling right now. I expect Michigan State to lose to them in Happy Valley. And I think the Michigan State-Ohio State game is going to be the championship game for the Big Ten East. I'll say it right now. Penn State Nittany Lions. Listen, I was not a fan of James Franklin, but he has done an exceptional job at Penn State and deserves all the credit in the world. Let's talk about the Penn State Nittany Lions at 10.
I don't understand why James Franklin isn't as polarizing as Harbaugh in the Big Ten, or is he? Some people might feel that way. I think he's done a fantastic job there, recruiting, winning the Big Ten championship 2 years ago, making Beaver Stadium a really tough place to play. They haven't lost there since they lost to Michigan in 15. Flip side of that is 3-9 against Michigan State, Michigan, and Ohio State. Hasn't beat any of those teams on the road. Has to go to Michigan this year. I think the Penn State-Michigan game will be huge. I think Penn State's got a decent chance to beat Ohio State on September 29th. I get what you're saying about Michigan State going up there, but to me, that's a 50-50 game for the Spartans. They can go out there and win that game. That's what makes this Big Ten East race so fun is that these, and on the flip side, tough because you got to go play all three of those teams.
I'm going to say this. If Penn State beats Ohio State in late September, Penn State's going to be your Big Ten East champion. I'm going to call it right now because I think it's going to come down to Michigan State and Ohio State in East Lansing. And the winner of that game will win the Big Ten East. But if Penn State beats Ohio State, because I already think they're going to beat Michigan State, I think they're going to be your Big Ten East champion. Next we come to a team. I'm sorry, go ahead. What are you going to say, buddy?
No, so that's a huge game early, and that's the first leg. I mean, I should probably go map all this out, but that game will set the tone for the rest of the race because we know Michigan State are going to play a great game in East Lansing. We know I do think Penn State could lose at Michigan, but that won't matter if they win against Ohio State. So I see your point there that I'll ask you this, Hondo, because you're into this just as deep as I am. I don't think the Big Ten East champion will go undefeated in the Big Ten.
Nope, I don't either. Well, I'm going to say this. Let me go back and say this. If I think Michigan State will lose at Penn State, I think that's going to be their only Big Ten loss going into the Ohio State game. If Ohio State beats Penn State, then I think they could because I think that Michigan State Ohio State game is going to be a battle. So I think if anyone does it, it will be Ohio State, but I don't think anyone. Again, I want to reiterate this. If Penn State Ohio State winner, I think is the only one who could do it. If Ohio State wins it, then I think Michigan State will have to beat them to win the Big Ten East. If Penn State does it, beats Ohio State, then I think they could because I think they are going to beat Michigan State. See, this is what I love, Bill, and I think you would agree with it. I think it's why you and I are so fortunate. And I think this is why we love doing what we do, Bill, because this is fun to get into all of this and talk about this. So, yeah, I guess I think a Penn State, if they beat Ohio State early, could. Or I think an Ohio State could if they beat Penn State and then have to go on the road and beat Michigan State, which is going to be very difficult. To me, though, this is the fun part of it.
Yeah, this race will be interesting. And I think one loss probably wins the Big Ten East. 2 losses, you're in trouble. My advice for the Big Ten teams is what Ohio State didn't follow last year. You can't lose a non-conference game. You can't lose a crossover game. You can't have a day like Ohio State had at Iowa. You can lose one. Like if you're Ohio State, if you're Michigan State, you can lose one of Ohio State, Penn State, and Michigan. You can't lose 2. So
Agreed.
I think that's how your path to the playoff, and that's asking a lot because all of these teams are so good.
Totally agree. And number 9, you got a team I find fascinating, the Notre Dame Fighting Irish.
Yeah, the opener at Michigan will be fun. I mean, if they lose, then Brian Kelly will probably need to be fired. That's what we'll hear. If they win, we'll probably hear Notre Dame can crack that playoff. That's a job where they won 10 games last year. Nobody remembers that. They remember losing to Miami. They remember losing to Georgia. He plays with his quarterbacks a lot. You know, I don't know if it'll be Wimbush or Book. They lose a couple NFL ones. Got a good one in Alex Barr's back. And the defense will be pretty good. That fascinating is a good word to use because when they play Michigan, that's a fascinating early season game because I think that's a game where the winner, oh, great, you did your job. The loser will be feeling the heat.
I call it the meltdown bowl because either fan base is going to melt down whoever loses that game. Would you agree?
Yeah, and I think not just that, but the season will be really tough because if you're Notre Dame against the schedule that they play, that includes Stanford in September, it includes Virginia Tech, it includes USC, it could be rough. And if Michigan loses that game, like I said, if you want to go to the playoff out of the Big Ten East, you better take care of your non-conference game. That's been proven. So, the losing fan base will have a meltdown. The winning team will be hyped up. That's how that game's worked our entire life, though, Hondo. You know that.
I agree with you 100%. Next, a team that I call the Screw You Bowl. Not really bowl, but the Screw You team. They beat Georgia. They beat Alabama, and somehow don't get in the playoff. You have them at number 8, the Auburn Tigers.
No program stock fluctuates more than Auburn. You know, they can win like they did last year. They were probably the toughest team in America at home last year with the big wins against, like you said, Georgia and Alabama. Gus Malzahn's had an up-and-down career there. They lost a lot to the NFL, they've got a huge opener against the next team we're going to talk about, and they got to go to Alabama and Georgia this year. Now, all that said, still a team capable of winning 10 games, braving through that schedule, maybe getting back to the SEC championship game. This is their third straight game in Atlanta, though, Hondo. They lost the SEC championship game. They lost to UCF, and when they play in the Chick-fil-A kickoff game, that's going to have to change.
We're talking to Bill Bender from the Sporting News. Bill, is Gus Malzahn? I know a lot of people that know him and like him. I don't know him. I've met him once, I think twice, matter of fact. I've always liked him. I was stunned he didn't get out of Auburn because there's no matter who you are at Auburn, you're not Nick Saban in Alabama, and Nick is so in their head. I thought he would have gone. Were you stunned he's still coaching there?
A little bit, because I thought Arkansas would really have tug at the heartstrings, the alma mater, the native son type thing, and they weren't able to pull that off. So, he obviously made a lot of money, but to your point, there are parallels between Alabama, Auburn, and Michigan State, but I think the difference at Michigan State is D'Antonio's taken the upper hand. I don't remember a time other than Tommy Tuberville where Auburn truly had the upper hand on Alabama, and they certainly haven't had the upper hand. Like you said it best, Auburn beat Alabama in the Iron Bowl last year in that biggest game for both schools, and it didn't matter. I don't want to say it didn't matter. It doesn't matter on some level because Alabama was the one holding up that national championship trophy. I
agree. He's the great Bill Bender from the Sporting News. More with him, including his top 7 when we come back. Welcome back to the Spartan Nation annual radio show with the Sporting News, going over to the Sporting News Top 25. Very glad to be joined by my good friend, prolific writer, terrific husband, great dad, and just an all-around good buddy. He's a good friend of mine, the great Bill Bender from the Sporting News. Bill, thanks for doing this again, bud.
All right, yeah, I know this is so much fun, and like I said, when you and I are just talking football, it goes by so fast. So, but we got the heavy hitters coming up here in this last segment.
Totally agree with you. Number 7, you have the Washington Huskies. Chris Peterson is in that top 5 of college coaches that are the most underrated, in my opinion. I think the Huskies are going to be tough. I think if they get the opening win at Auburn, I think they've got a good shot between them and Stanford of winning the Pac-12. Your thoughts on the Huskies at 7?
So similar to Mark Antonio. If there was a team I'd like to see Michigan State play, I think it would be Washington, because it'd just be a fun football game to watch. Whether that would happen in the Rose Bowl or playoffs, because Chris Peterson just does things the right way. They always have a top 10 defense. They've got an experienced quarterback in Jake Browning. They've got, a 3-year 1,000-yard guy in Myles Gaskin. But, Hondo, they're playing the single biggest game in the Pac-12 this year against Auburn. If they lose that game, because the Pac-12 went 1-8 in their bowl game, the whole conference is going to feel it. And I feel like Washington would get penalized more for losing to Auburn than rewarded for winning the Pac-12. That is a huge game for the conference.
110% agree. And I love these. I love now that there's a playoff because it makes these big games. Guys are willing to go outside and play them a little bit. I love it. I love it. I love it. I love it. And by the way, in case you didn't know, Bill, I love it. I love these big games. Number 6 is a program of just solid consistency. They're always there. Last year on this show, I said I expected them to be very high because their schedule was weak. I said on this show I expected them to be undefeated going into the Big Ten championship game, where I said they would lose to Ohio State. They made me look smart because their season played out exactly like I said. This year, still a relatively, and I use relative, still an easier schedule, not like last year. But I think they're a better football team, and I have no problems with you having them at 6, the Wisconsin Badgers.
No, they're good, and they play in that Big Ten West. Again, they've got some tough crossover games against Penn State and Michigan. They play Iowa early. I think that's a game to watch. Iowa can really shake up the race if they can pull an upset there. But Wisconsin is loaded. The thing that stuck out with me when they beat Miami in the Orange Bowl was their skill position guys were beating Miami's skill position guys, and it wasn't close. The receivers played well. Jonathan Taylor was probably the best player on the field. Alex Hornibrook has to play better this year, Hondo. He threw a lot of picks last year. And I think they live in a world where, to me, they'll do all those things, but it comes down to when you get to Indianapolis, you got to beat the king of the Big Ten East. And Paul Chryst, for all the good he's done, 2-4 against those 4 teams from the Big Ten East.
I agree with you. All right, next we come to a team. I love their young coach, Lincoln Riley, the Oklahoma Sooners.
Well, they've beaten the Big 12. I know Kyler Murray's future has gotten a lot of headlines, but they're just the team to beat in that conference. They find a way. I think Lincoln Riley's a great play caller. We'll see what he learned from. I think they did go a little too conservative in the bowl game loss to Georgia, but I was so impressed with him when I went to the Ohio State game last year, and he outcoached Urban Meyer. The play calling was better. He used Baker Mayfield. He moved him around in the pocket. They beat Ohio State soundly at Ohio Stadium, and everybody who follows the Big Ten knows how hard that is to do. So I have no problem with them winning the Big 12 again. The key for them is that's a conference, though, like the Pac-12, people don't think as highly of the Pac-12 and Big 12, so they've got to earn their playoff spot. They do that by you can't lose 2 games.
You know, Oklahoma to me, and maybe I'm wrong, and if I am, you can say this to me, but to me this is an Oklahoma TCU conference. Everyone else is a pretender to me. Is that fair?
No, those are the 2 teams to watch. I think Texas could contend. I think the team that I didn't have ranked that I got some heat for was West Virginia because they do have an offense. That's another team like Oklahoma State. Well, Will Greer and David Sills can put up some points, but you got to stop somebody. And that's that conference. The team that gets not a lot of stops, the team that gets a few stops wins. So to your point, I think that's why Oklahoma and TCU are probably the best set up to win that conference.
Yeah, totally agree with you. And I do want to say this. I love Texas. I do love Herman. I just think he's a year away from being a real contender. But that was not a slam on the Longhorns at all. But I do love Tom Herman. I love what he's doing there. Number 4, you got a team there that I think maybe even a little underrated in my opinion at 4. But I can't argue because once you're in the top 4, it doesn't really matter. The Ohio State Buckeyes.
The talent, you know this. The talent's there. Dwayne Haskins stepping in at quarterback. They got that resolved. They got 2 1,000-yard rushers and J.K. Dobbins and Mike Weber. They've got talent all over the offensive line. They've got 2 top 5 picks coming at you at defensive end, and Nick Bosa's one, and Chase Young's a name that you guys are going to learn this year because I think he's just going to have a breakout season. They've got 4 and 5-star guys that Urban Meyer's piled up. And that's tough to beat. I mean, they have had some blips of inconsistency, and that Iowa game last year obviously cost them the playoff. But everybody else in the conference is still chasing Urban Meyer. I know Mark D'Antonio, they've had some success against him. That's what makes that game in East Lansing so interesting. But, I mean, 6-0 against Michigan, there are no complaints for what Urban Meyer's doing. But I think they found out last year that the one program they can't just out-program on reputation is Alabama.
No, I agree 100%. Number 3, the Georgia Bulldogs. Well, I mean, I think you got to give Kirby Smart a ton of credit. That team is as loaded as Alabama talent-wise and Clemson. I think Kirby's a great coach. Let's talk some Bulldogs.
Leadership has to be there this year. That'll be what I'm watching. Leadership in losing Nick Chubb and Sonny Michel and Roquan Smith and those guys that were sitting out in the rain when Alabama beat them 38-0, and that was the end of the Mark Richt era. And you wondered what's next for Georgia. When will they ever be relevant again? And, well, Kirby Smart's made that happen. He's recruited like a maniac. He's won big games. That game against South Carolina is huge. But they are in a division where Florida and Tennessee are breaking new coaches in. And I think if I was at a betting window right now and you tried to tell me that anybody else but Georgia and Alabama will be playing for that SEC championship in Atlanta, I tell you were crazy.
Agree. 100%. No argument there. Next, we come to number 2. And to me, 1 or 2 here doesn't matter. You can flip it either way. I love me some Clemson Tigers. I love Dabo Swinney.
1A, 1B, however you want to do it. Clemson's going to have 4 guys on their defensive line this year that will be first-round picks. And they might all be first-round picks in next year's draft. So if I was an ACC quarterback, I might take up basketball or something because you got those 4 guys coming at you. They have some drama at quarterback because Kelly Bryant didn't play well in the championship game. He did get them there to the playoff. He didn't play well in that semifinal, I'm sorry. And Trevor Lawrence has generated a lot of hype. I do think they would never admit it down there, but I just believe that Clemson's entire offseason and entire season will be designed around what are we going to do differently the next time we play Alabama. Because I think those are clearly the two best teams in college football. Clemson-Alabama 4 is going to happen, whether it's in the semifinals or the championship game. And I know that's going to turn off some viewers, but I mean, Honda, these are the best teams.
Yep. Next, the Alabama Crimson Tide.
What am I supposed to do? I think they've got the talent. They've got two new coordinators, something to watch, but Saban's always been able to make that work. They've got Tua Tagovailoa and Jalen Hurts, the quarterback, that's throwing a lot of headlines. But they're just they haven't lost more than one regular season game since 2010. To bet against them would be foolish. I think Nick Saban has a process that clearly works, and everybody else is still chasing him. And even last year, even when it doesn't work, they'll get the benefit of the doubt. And I didn't have a huge problem with them not getting in. I think it creates some interesting playoff discussions, but right now college football is, it's Alabama's planet. They're not even an SEC team to me. They're almost like their own planet where you have to beat them twice just to get them out of the way.
You know what, Bill? You know what I think of you? You're one of my favorite people. You're a great person, great husband, great father, and a terrific friend. That's Bill Bender from the Sporting News. And you know this. Love his picks, hate his picks. He always stands behind him because he's smart. And I love smart people, and Bill Bender's one of them on the Spartan Nation Radio Network. Spartan Nation